All right, we're going to call to order the September 19th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council, Redevelopment, Successor Agency, and Financing Authority. I'd like to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight is going to be led by the Director of Finance, Roberta Raper.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the council did not meet in closed session this evening, so we're going to proceed directly to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, state law prohibits us from taking action or having an extensive discussion about items that are brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We do ask that anyone wishing to address the council on this or any other agenda item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available kind of near the front door and turn it in to the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use just to make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard. And to that end, we ask that all comments be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart that simply indicates which agenda item is currently under consideration. The clerk accepts the yellow cards all the way to the conclusion of the staff report on any particular agenda item. Once the testimony and the discussion and the questions have begun, we don't take any additional speaking requests, so if you're here on a particular agenda item, I'd encourage you to turn the card in as soon as you can, but definitely by the conclusion of the staff report. And also just to note then that for some folks, I don't see any of these kind of folks here tonight, but for some folks, speaking in public can be a nerve-wracking experience, and we try to maintain a civil discourse in the chamber and avoid boos or catcalls or even applause or other demonstrations. So with that, we do have one request to speak under item 1A. It's by Forrest Gardens. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for letting me come up tonight. I'm hoping that I can talk a little bit about the fire that had happened in our mobile home park today. About 2:30, I'm getting calls at the office saying, "Hey, look, we have 3 fire trucks that are in our park." The thing is that I've kind of touched on it before, as far as emergency exits and things like that go. Our park recently changed its emergency exit so that the entrance is not only the entrance but exit. Again, we can't get out. We're surrounded by a brick wall. Fire department says that we should have 2 pedestrian exits. HCD feels that that's not necessary. So the thing is that the landlords that are running these mobile home parks, it's really challenging to work with them because a lot of times they're just looking at it as like an investment. And the human element that comes to owning these affordable housing units kind of gets lost in the market versus social battle that kind of goes on with these large properties. So the thing is that I kind of hope that maybe the city might be able to do something like maybe collect $1 from each resident once a month. I think there's about 2,500 units park-wide, and that might be able to fund a position to kind of help get folks the help that they need, either directing them to maybe legal resources or any variety of things, is maybe helping track the rent increases that are going on, because I realize that that's also an ordinance. I just kind of feel like the city might be able to do just a little bit more to help those of us that are in affordable housing, because the thing is that in order for us to enforce the MRL, which is a law book that kind of creates a contract between residents and landlords, in order for us to enforce any of that, we have to take them to court. And so we're kind of like down here on the totem pole, and you've got some of these parks that are clocking like $120,000 a month. And so a lot of us feel like there's a retaliation that kind of comes in because our homes are on their land. And if we rub them the wrong way, then when we're like, okay, well, we can't afford to move the house, and there's evictions and things like that. So I guess what I'm asking is that we've got to kind of have a small office that's dedicated to this kind of issue, if it's at all possible. Maybe just think about it. It's like the thing over here at Casa, they've got a fence that's just falling down all over the place. And when I've engaged with their management, I said, well, when you have residents that aren't maintaining their lot, you'll go in and you'll fix their lot and charge them for it. But we don't have that same remedy as far as residents saying, please, you have to do these types of maintenance and upkeep. we don't have a tool in our box to say, please repair the fence. Over here at Park West, they were having an issue with the electricity constantly going down. And we had a couple of folks that were on oxygen, and I understand that there was a couple of deaths. And we're not sure if, because they were senior citizens alone in their homes and the power goes out and their oxygen shut off, was that a direct correlation of those kinds of things? So what I'm begging this council is, can we please just get somebody here to dedicate time for the parks?
Right. Thanks, Mr. Gardens. That's the only request we had under item 1A. On the fire issue in particular, so this, for me at least, it's the first time I've heard of the issue between us and the State Housing and Community Development Department. So if we have made a request along, in conjunction with our fire department to HCD, which has been denied, and there's a role for us to play, in perhaps elevating that, maybe you could provide us additional background in the newsletter or in our packets. And then second, I know our ability to construct assessments and that sort of thing is very, very limited. So I'd be skeptical that we would have the legal authority to impose $1 or some charge on all mobile home residents for this purpose. But if if you can provide us in the next, in writing in our packets, just some background on those two issues. Sure. So we can take a look, because these are important issues for a lot of our residents.
Right.
Okay, thanks. All right, then that brings us to item 1B, which is council communications. Are there any reports or other communications this evening? Mr. Johannesson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Yellow Solana Air Quality Management District met on September 12th. 3 items that were discussed were we approved the fiscal year 18-19 budget. We also heard an information report on Northern Yolo County Special Monitoring Study, which essentially spread these real-time monitors throughout the district to look at see what the correlation were with the permanent monitors. And then lastly, we heard an informational report on the update on the recent wildfires affecting Yolo and Solana counties. And as one would expect, we did have decreased air quality during those days. However, because of the wind patterns, it wasn't really that significant. That's it.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Sandine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Water Resources Association of Yolo County met on September 17th. We approved the association's operating budget and heard an update on water legislation and regulatory issues. We heard about Prop 3 and AB 2348 that will deal with the groundwater recharge. We also heard about the efforts of a coalition working to improve access to safe drinking water throughout the state. And then following that meeting, the Yolo Sub-Basin Groundwater Agency also met, and we heard from DWR about a climate change resource guide they have made available to agencies and individuals. And we announced an RFP process to select an auditor for the JPA. And then last week, I had the opportunity to attend the League of California Cities Conference to represent our city. I attended the Sacramento Valley Division membership meeting, the General Assembly meeting, several women's caucus events, plus 2 general sessions and several city talks and presentations. There was also a vendor expo, and thanks to the executive team here, they provided me with a list of that matched up with all of the vendors that the city works with, and I was able to meet with 41 of the 49 vendors that were at the conference. And that includes our city attorney, who was there while I was trying to meet all of these folks. I brought back a lot of updates and information for the staff, and I've left those and shared those with the city manager. The most sobering presentation I attended was strategies to manage increasing pension costs. And it was made clear that pension rate increases from CalPERS for public agencies will divert funds from important projects and priorities. There are very few options for cities that do not have deleterious consequences. The presenters shared options such as, and we know about these, higher levels of participation in paying for the benefits by our staff, restructuring of compensation and benefits to minimize impacts of CalPERS increases. But CalPERS has created a dire financial situation for nearly every city in California. There unfortunately was little optimism at that presentation and no good solutions for the situation. However, on the brighter side, other presentations I attended about homelessness, data-driven decision-making, creating a collaborative community, and planning technologies were all very kind of affirming, as we are already leading or developing solutions in those areas. So I appreciate my colleagues allowing me to attend that, and it was, as more information comes forward, I'm happy to serve as kind of our liaison if the council pleases, for the League of Cities.
Great, and thank you so much for serving. I mean, the city has had a rich history of leadership in the California League of Cities at the council and staff level. Our former colleague, Mr. Christoph, was the chair of the Revenue and Taxation Committee for all the cities in California. I served on the League of Cities board, and many of our department directors and others, other staff in the city have served in leadership positions in the league, and where we brought back lots of really great ideas, also some of the sobering policy issues, and also contributed to other communities around us and to the development of better state policy. But it's very time-consuming, all the meetings and all the groups and what have you. So thank you very much for taking that up. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you. I just have one item to report tonight. That's a meeting we had this past Monday, which was the 17th, with the Yellow Habitat Conservancy. We received a few updates, mainly around we're awaiting our permits still. Those are being in final routing, and we're just awaiting for those to be finalized in the next few weeks and be sent to us. We also got an overview of some of the financial options we will have as we start that agency. The good news is for the agency, there's been, since it has been confirmed that we're going to get the permits, there's been a few projects that are ready to participate in those. One from Davis, one here in West Sacramento, and I forgot what the third one is off the top of my head. But again, that's what the permit is for. Developers are starting to see the benefit of that permit, that they can get through that process pretty quickly and use it. So they want to ask, how soon can we use it? And the agency still has to kind of get all those, all the infrastructure of that ready. So we had a discussion about that, what we'll need to do to kind of get ready to use the permit. So it was a really good discussion, and I'll be working along with Chair Provenza with the executive director to kind of putting together a plan for that for the next 6 to 12 months. We also talked about, once we do get the permits, there'll be a signing ceremony, and the board unanimously agreed we would do it here in West Sacramento. It's just a good place to celebrate with all the state folks that helped further that. So we'll be looking at setting dates, and I think we're going to be working through the city staff. I want to thank city staff for stepping in and helping find a spot and being able to accommodate hosting that event. So anyway, that's all I have for today.
I have a few. First, the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, and it's probably the most extensive one. The Transportation Committee met earlier this month, and tomorrow the board meets, where there's a gazillion items, but a couple that I wanted to highlight is first, the board is about to approve our annual allocation of the state transit assistant funds. It's about $450,000 to support our work on YOLO bus and associated public transit. We're also slated tomorrow to be approved to receive $80,000 in the what's called the Transportation Demand Management Traditional Grant Program. This is the highest amount of any city in the region. Only four proposals in the entire region are proposed to be funded, one of which is for West Sacramento, and it is for innovating safe routes to schools, transcending the public K-8 curriculum, and work that we'll be doing with high schools and charter schools in the community, and really kind of taking safe routes to schools to the next level. And into the 21st century, and then providing, again, lessons for other cities in the region that are wanting to do the same. So, kudos to our staff for really excellent work in competing in a program that a lot of folks throughout the region were after for a small total amount of money, but really excellent work. The main item that's before the board, and I know I've described this before, but it's an incredibly we're talking about a $40 billion spending plan, so it's pretty important. And that's the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Sustainable Communities Strategy. The MTP is the transportation planning document that's required by the federal government that covers between now and 2040. And the Sustainable Community Strategy is the land use plan associated with that transportation plan that also contains, is also our strategy for achieving the regional targets for reduction in climate change emissions that the State Air Resources Board has assigned to each of the regions in California. Our assigned target in climate change for the Sacramento metropolitan region is a 19% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions between now and 2035 or 2040. That's a much more aggressive, well, it's a more aggressive target than we think or that we thought we could accomplish. Obviously, now it's the rule and we will have to, and we're looking for additional resources to help accomplish that. But it is an aggressive goal, and it cannot be achieved simply through electric vehicles or other technology-based strategies. The only way that that's achievable is by pretty profound changes in the way that our land use pattern has been built out. So nothing earth-shattering, because we and most cities in the region, from Colfax to Winters, have also been pursuing a similar strategy of more compact development, less sprawl. And a much greater use of modes of mobility that are not single occupancy vehicles. If we don't make a gigantic dent in that, there's no way we can hit the 19%. So that process has been underway. I briefed the council before that as a result of updated forecasts of population and job growth for the region, if you add up all the general plans in the region, you add up their forecasted growth between now and 2035 or 2040, it's a lot more than the actual forecast for the region as a whole based on demographic and economics analysis. So it's not a surprise, right? Because the general plans they're not a forecast of exactly what will be on the ground. And so we zone more retail than we probably expect to see, because we want to make sure that retail is possible in many locations in the city. Even though we don't necessarily assume that all of it will ever get built, we want to make sure that we haven't bet on the wrong places. So we spread our bets more broadly around. So our build-out projection for the city, for example, is 91,000 jobs and 48,000 housing units. Well, so that's a reflection of that consequence. That's not a good jobs housing balance for really, but other jurisdictions all have the same thing. Kind of heavy on commercial, retail, and industrial development, lighter on housing. But even housing is projected if you added up all the general plans, at much greater numbers than the forecast for the region as a whole, independent of the general plans. So the challenge then is how to come up with a transportation spending plan based on growth allocations to each of the jurisdictions, and within the jurisdictions to specific areas of those cities and counties that add up to what the actual forecast is. Also, because revenues are not sufficient to build out everybody's general plans. There isn't enough money for that, and the federal government doesn't allow you to simply say, we hope to get the money. We have to demonstrate that we know where we're going, in reasonable terms, where the money is going to come from for those projects. And so the extent to which population doesn't grow as fast as might have been forecast in a general plan, and neither does economic development, then you don't have as much resources. So the twin forces of reducing the jobs and housing unit forecast and substantially reducing the amount of money available for transportation projects has put us, as it does every 4 years, in the position of having to make some hard choices in the region and fight about which projects we are forecasting to get built. So the region puts together the Sustainable Community Strategy, which is a map of the region, identifying where growth of what type and how many units is expected to occur. It's not at the parcel level, and it's not an entitlement. It's not a regional general plan. It's really a regional forecast that's informed by the general plans. But trying to take more, this land plan under the Sustainable Community Strategy is really looking at, okay, given it's in your general plan, is it actually entitled? And if it's entitled, is there any sign that the builder's actually going to do something with it, right? So you're looking at the actual facts on the ground in that case. Even doing that, there's still more projects. There's still more projects out there than we can accommodate. So the big debate that's been happening is how to accomplish that. So the SACOG, the Transportation Committee, which I chair, has released a discussion draft for the MTP. It's not the preliminary draft. It's a draft purely to get people talking, to have something tangible to get our arms around. And that draft was before the committee at the beginning of this month. It should be approved by the board tomorrow for release for discussion. And it reconciles all the numbers that I was just describing. And just at the top level, so our general plan projects at build out would be at 91,710 jobs and 48,000 housing units. And under the discussion draft, between now and 2040, we would grow under this draft, we would grow by almost 17,000 jobs and about 16,000 housing units. So a substantial piece, but not, obviously not 91,000 jobs and not 48,000 housing units. We have been, our staff in several departments, but led by community development, have been very engaged in the process of, figuring out how to, the projects that we have, what's in the pipeline. And one of those big debates has been about some of the Southport projects, principally Yarborough and River Park. So in this draft, in this discussion draft, Yarborough is included and River Park is not. It doesn't mean River Park can't get built, but it does mean River Park is not forecast to be built in the timeframe that would occur under this plan. And therefore, the transportation projects to serve River Park are not in the transportation side of the plan. So the land use plan that the region constructs can't tell us what to do in terms of land use planning, but whether a transportation project that serves that area of development is funded or not, which obviously has an impact on whether it can happen, that the region does have a say in that through this plan. So at the moment, Yarborough is in, River Park is not in, Pioneer Bluff is in at a certain level. Obviously, some of the growth in Bridge District and Washington and other core areas of the city are in it as well. But the big debate up to that point has been that. That's not so. That's a good outcome in our overall. It's also, although this is a plan for 2035 and 2040, we redo the plan every 4 or 5 years. So it's not, what we really care about is one of these projects likely to be moving in that time horizon? Because if it happens in 7 years, it's no big deal. We can just put it in 4 years from now in the next plan. So that at the land use level, that's what's happening. Again, it's a discussion draft only. Sacramento County in particular always has a gazillion land, projects out in the middle of nowhere that they want to add to the plan. So there's going to be a fight tomorrow and through the next several months at the region as some of the other cities and counties in the region want to add projects into the plan. And that if they were to succeed, because it all has to add up, it would require us to remove Yarborough or remove Liberty or whatever. So it will be a battle, but, and you may hear about it or may be asked to participate in various ways. So I want to make sure the council is fully aware of that issue, even though it's been a fairly long report. And I'm only halfway done with it because that's the sustainable community strategy portion of it. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan then is the transportation budget for that same time period. And that's about, I think it's about $40 billion between now and 2040. Those are the funds that we anticipate receiving based on past practice and federal policies from the federal government, from the state government, from developer fees, from SB1, from regular gas tax revenues and others. So they're funding sources that are either assured or normal or regular or reasonable from a federal perspective for us to anticipate. And they have to line up with that sustainable community strategy. Our staff prepared extensive, background on a lot of potential projects that we want in this document. When we the first time the real MTP was created, I think we had 3 projects in it, some 3 or 4 projects in it for the next 20 years. And I think they might have totaled $40 million. It was like the harbor interchange. I forget what else, but and those were ambitious, and we got them, and they're built now. The discussion draft includes nearly $400 million of projects for West Sacramento, we proposed nearly $800 million. So, our staff was not shy in that process. Because we have a lot of needs, because we are expected to grow faster than most other places in the region, and certainly we're expected to grow faster than anyone else in the county over the period of the next 25 years. So the draft has, in the range of $300 to $400 million, and that includes projects like the Broadway Bridge and others, but we're not done. There's still some fighting to be done on this piece of it. It includes the Deepwater Channel deepening, for example, which is not currently a city, or it's not currently a Port Commission priority. Given the federal climate, we're not likely to see any federal money for that project. So, whether rail relocation or the Enterprise Bridge or some other, or projects in Stone Lock, for example, which are not included, might get added as well. But happy to share with council the draft list of projects. But it is both impressive in what we've accomplished so far, and also there's some gaps that we want to work to fill for some critical projects in the city going forward. And I would highlight kind of Stone Lock, Southern Pioneer Bluffs, Enterprise, and rail relocation as the top ones of those, because pretty much everything else that we care about was put in the plan in the discussion draft already. So. All right, so I apologize for the long report, but it's 25 years of a lot of money, so. Okay, so since I'm on climate anyway, last week I attended the Global Climate Action Summit, the convening of mayors. This is the week-long summit that Governor Brown held. Obviously, we received a lot of attention, and we were asked to participate. City of Sacramento participated on a different day. We kind of split it up to share what we're doing on things like VIA and JUMP and our land use policies and the greenhouse gas funding that we received for both West Gateway Place, as the very first affordable housing project built with cap and trade, opened, completed, built with cap and trade funds in California, and what we're doing with the cap and trade funds in the Washington district in the infrastructure and in art and in parks and in livability as well, which no one else in the country is doing. California is leading the way, and within California, we're certainly one of the leaders in that space too. So we're asked to present on some of that, on both mobility and on the use of cap and trade and the potential intersections with opportunity zones as well. And then yesterday, Mayor Steinberg and I, with the support of several philanthropic organizations and other civic and business organizations and community organizations in the region, launched the Mayor's Commission on Climate Change. And this is a non-publicly funded, well, the City of Sacramento is putting a small amount of resources in it, but it's essentially a non-city funded effort that assembles some very experienced, both thought leaders, but thought leaders who get stuff done, with the support of the local government commission and their excellent staff on sustainability to develop implementable action strategy, bold strategies that will help us to achieve net zero in carbon emissions by the year 2045. That's a very ambitious goal for the two cities, but we have a long record of activism in this space. Our two cities were the leaders in creating the original CCAP program, the Sacramento Emergency Clean Air and Transportation Program, really 2 decades ago. And we were one of the first cities of our size and Mr. Tilley and Paulina and others in city staff, Charlene probably worked on this personally as well. We've done, our city has kind of shown like regular cities that don't have a department of sustainability or whatever, how you just do it is regular work. So we've and then obviously the work on cap and trade. So we've done a lot, but we're nowhere near, as a collection of cities in the world, we're nowhere near getting to those targets. And the implications for us, we're already seeing obviously with fire and drought and increased flood risk as a result of climate change that are already visiting. Some reports show 89% of cities in America are already facing severe events, and we're among them, given the drought conditions that we've already faced. So this commission is being tasked relatively quickly to come up with bold, strong strategies that the cities can implement, but also that city partners, businesses, and others can do that are technology-based or that are neighborhood revitalization and reducing the dependence on cars for folks, around mobility solutions, like I said, neighborhood and energy, renewable energy, a full range of those solutions to try to hit that zero carbon goal. It's going to be chaired by Ann Stossball, who's the recently retired head of the CalPERS board, so she can write the balance in the world for what CalPERS has done with our cities, but also has a lot. Michael Teal, the CEO and chairman and CEO of Raley's, obviously one of the marquee corporations here in our city and one of the most longstanding corporate citizens here, has agreed to serve. And I'm grateful that Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma has agreed to serve. He and Councilmember Hanson in Sacramento will be the only elected officials who are serving on the commission and providing guidance and leadership and connectivity to what the cities are doing. But it is an exciting effort. Mayor Steinberg has raised nearly $100,000 to support that work, so it's not a burden on us. Our staff is connected, but we're not asking the City of West Sacramento staff to do direct work for the commission either. So we're looking forward to their recommendations. The first meeting will be convened relatively soon. So I'm getting there, sorry. I represent the city on the Greater Sacramento Economic Council Board of Directors, and we met last week. The principal issue or opportunity that emerged, there was obviously a lot of things on their agenda, but was the development of a technology accelerator in the region. And West Sacramento was actually the home of one of the very first, if not the first, of the technology incubators. Charlie, what's Charlie?
Soderquist?
Yeah, Charlie Soderquist Technology Development Center right here in West Sacramento was one of the first in the region in this space. But obviously, the world has become much more sophisticated in that time. And so the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, which is principally composed of corporate CEOs and then a handful of mayors and a couple of city managers as well, is trying to focus on how do we create the right ecosystem for startups to thrive. And it's much more than just the initial incubation, and then how do we keep them here. And I think one of the things that we've learned from some of our local successful startups has been in issues that you might not have expected, which is that they have a challenge recruiting locally for their workforce, but one of their bigger challenges is just moving folks who have expertise in CRISPR technology and gene editing, for example, or genomics or other things that they're reluctant to come here to work for a startup in West Sacramento because if the startup doesn't succeed, which obviously many of them don't, and they've moved their family and they've joined the Little League and they're in a church now and they have to up in their whole life. And so it's very important to them for there to be other companies in the same space that they could see themselves working for. And so part of the purpose of an accelerator is to really focus not just on individual companies popping out of an incubator, but really the ecosystem as well. So we're looking to GSEC, to the council, to be putting together a project jointly with some Bay Area venture capitalists and with the local venture capital community as well to support that work. And obviously, because we are one of the key centers in the region for the entrepreneurial and startup sector, this will be a key issue for us. I neglected to mention on climate change, just like I think the council is aware, but there's a project I think it's funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies called the New American Road Trip, and they are making a film, complete film that will for release later in the year. But they are visiting communities of all shapes, sizes, and types around the country that are doing, I think the way that ordinary communities doing extraordinary things around climate change. And their very first stop was here. Because of some of the mobility issue via jump and cap and trade and affordable housing and other things that we were doing in West Sacramento. So they've already released that video clip, and they're going to be doing that as well. And it was a really positive, kind of look at what's happening in our community and how uplifting neighborhoods and people's lives is really critical to averting climate change. It's not just about looking for another engineering solution. So I thought that was a good reflection on what we're doing. The other thing I'd note, we hosted several council members have been on some of the regional study missions to other regions. We hosted here in West Sacramento the Oklahoma City Regional Study Mission. It all kind of blurs, but I think last week. So they had heard about some of the stuff that we're doing on the waterfront, which is kind of similar to the issues that Oklahoma City has. They're 5 times bigger than us, but there were some key lessons around amenities, public financing, and budgeting, and other things that they wanted to see how they were playing out here on the ground as well. And then lastly, just to acknowledge and to thank our staff team and their work with the Delta Protection Commission and obviously the Mayor Pro Tem, who we're both out there. Again, cleaning up trash of all kinds and needles and other needles on the waterfront in order to keep our water clean and to keep the riverfront safe. But that was a partnership between the Delta Protection Commission and the Parks and Recreation Department here. Again, one thing to note, we found a lot less in terms, 2 years ago in that same location, we were filling up gigantic dumpster after gigantic dumpster, and this year we filled up a dumpster, but it was nothing like that. And that's partly because we got rid of a lot of that stuff before, and partly because of just the increased maintenance and patrols, principally by Parks, but other departments as well. And then also the goats, because when the goats help to clear the brush, it makes it less likely that somebody thinks, oh, I can just sneak back here and leave a tire or a dryer or a human body or whatever. And so it's that combination of all of those strategies together, resulted in a much easier cleanup. But kudos to Parks and our DPC partners for that work. I forgot streetcar. So the Streetcar Joint Powers Authority Board met yesterday, and more or less an update. But I think it may have already been reported by either Mr. Ledesma or Mr. Johansson. We received the bids back for the streetcars themselves. So we're doing two major bids. One was for the streetcar equipment, and the other bid is for the construction of the rail line and everything else. We issued the streetcar bid, it came back, and the winning bid was under budget by a couple of $1 million. So that was great news for the project, because that was obviously one of the issues that all of us had been concerned about. Given the economic climate and the trade war and the issues around steel and stuff, would we have a problem with bidding? And the answer was no. The bids were under. We got a bid, but it was determined to be non-responsive by Siemens. And I think, some folks have been rooting for Siemens because they're a local company. There are West Sacramentans that work at their facility in South Sacramento County. But Siemens is really busy right now, and so Siemens said, we can give you light rail cars, basically. But we can't, right now our plant's just doing that. And so we can't make the shorter cars that you're asking for streetcar. And that's kind of a non-negotiable, because if the cars are too long, the traffic patterns and everything has to change. So the board couldn't consider the Siemens application, but that was good. So what's coming next is the RFP on the construction of the actual system and the putting the rails in the ground and everything else. And that's about to be released in October with a submission deadline of December 20th. So December 20th is going to be a key date for us to see, because that's now the kind of the critical question out there for everybody, for us, the federal government, and our other partners, is we need to come in on budget on that one, or pretty close to it on that piece. And once that occurs, we've been very much assured by the federal government. We've dealt with all of the normal risk assessment issues that they have identified. We've dealt with all of them more or less. This is the key one that's outstanding as well. What's the cost going to be? And the best way we argued back to them, the best way to figure out what the cost is to go out and get a legally enforceable bid. And so they agreed, and that's what we're doing. In December 20th, we'll open up those bids as well. I would just ask also if colleagues run into members of the Sacramento Regional Transit Board. They are in the process of considering the release of $3 million of the funds that are in their jurisdiction for expenditure on the project right now. We have asked them to do that in conjunction with the two cities also deciding, agreeing to do that under the federal government's advice. When the federal government said, yes, the money is yours, but you need to keep making progress on the project. And so Regional Transit is currently considering that. The board's open to it. It's had some issues and questions and contingencies and that sort of thing. And so to the extent you run into at other boards or other events, members of the RT board, just to reinforce the need to stay on track and to keep the project going, and that we're just about there, because the federal government, once we get the bids open, the feds have indicated that they will be very quick to a full funding agreement. So, all right. That's it then on item 1B. We have no appointments. As we indicated previously, we're going to hold off on non-emergency appointments until after the election. So that brings us to the consent agenda, which is items 2 through 10. Are there items to pull or items for separate question or comment?
I'll move the recommended action.
Oh, so we had a request for public comment on a couple of them. So we'll do that first. We're not going to pull 5. I just want to note on 5, which is the sewer item that went back to the Environmental Utilities Commission. This is a good model for what, for how it should be done. This is an excellent staff report and presentation of what the commission discussed and what they voted to recommend. So thanks to Public Works, City Clerk, City Manager's Office. I'm sure 17 people collaborated in order to make this happen, but it's exactly what's useful what's important for the council to have. So thank you for that. Okay, so item 6 is consideration of a contract extension with Zen City for social media sentiment analysis software, and we have a request to speak by Laura Jamieson.
Good evening. Zen City, my favorite topic. 18,000, I think, honestly, it's a waste of money. Just get out and talk to your constituents. Listen to them. Listen to the loud few that speak up here. Don't block people on social media, Mayor Cabaldon. It's just listen to your constituents. You don't need to spend money on this software to tell you what you should already know. When I look at the monthly reports, I already know all this. What's interesting, before this meeting, I decided to take a look at the March 2018 Zen City report. And in case you don't recall, there was a meeting in a city council meeting in March that included Memorial Park, the barn, and the Reclamation District takeover. It's interesting to note that that Zen City report didn't mention any of those 3 topics. So those reports don't capture really what's going on in the city and what people are concerned about. So it's just, honestly, I think it's a waste of money. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Jamieson, you're up next, so, so item 8 then is consideration of an agreement governing release of personally identifiable student information by the Washington Unified School District for evaluating the college savings account program of the West Sacramento Home Run.
When I looked at the agreement, I was surprised to see that the school district is going to be giving the city data on students' GPAs, the classes they're enrolled in, their test scores on the SATs, what colleges they've applied to. Now, I recognize this only applies to students that, I guess, meet the qualifications for completing preschool and then enrolling in kindergarten within the city. But to me, the city should not be collecting that data at all. If you want this information, my recommendation is for the school district to do this analysis, so all that data stays at the school district, and then they provide the results to the city. I'm sorry, the city should not be in the business of obtaining this information. And today, in this day and age with data breaches, I don't trust, no offense to the city staff, I don't trust that it would stay safe. So to me, that information should not be given to the city at all. And also, when I was looking at the items, I think item number 2 mentioned, even if parents opt out of receiving the $50 and they don't participate in the program, their kids' data will still go to the city. So there's not a mechanism for parents to even opt out of having their data go to the city. And I find that highly objectionable. I recognize the city believes that this meets the federal exemption requirements, but as a parent, I am very worried that I cannot stop my kids' data from going to the city. So I kind of object to this program. And then kind of on a separate note, to be honest, I think this program, it's going to cost a lot of money for very little benefit. $50 plus interest, it's really not going to do much for the cost of college. I don't think there's a good benefit of this. I think it's costing more than it's really worth. So thank you.
All right, thank you. That's it. I would just say this is a pretty. I've reviewed a lot of data sharing agreements in education in my career in the community colleges. It's pretty standard, and it's essential that both students who participate in the savings account and do not, that their data be available for analysis by our university partners and others. Otherwise, we can't tell whether the program's had any effect in terms of completion and graduation. And so both for the children themselves, so that we can continue to improve the design of the program, the linkages between this program and our high-quality preschools, and also to assure the taxpayers of the city that their dollars are being appropriately spent, it is essential that that the data be analyzed. This is not data that's going to be published anywhere. It's not going to be available to any of us on the city council or city staff. There's no stricter. I think some people would argue that education privacy laws for data are stricter than the health privacy laws for data. So it will not be. This is not going to be released in any way, and we work closely with the district on it. And with respect to the amount, I would just also indicate that the research on college savings accounts is profound. That the children who have a college savings account, and some of the scientific research on this, even of this amount, even of of a $50 or $100 put in at the one time, that the rate of going on to college increases by 7-fold. And so if you are an executive at a public agency or whatever, it may not seem like a lot of money, that $50, but for many families, that marker is very significant around what the future is about, what the future holds, and what the possibilities are in store in our community for those young people. So, all right. Anything else on the consent agenda? Do you want to move it again?
I'll move the recommended action of the consent agenda.
Okay, it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, seconded by Councilmember Orozco, that the consent agenda be adopted. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That brings us to item 11, which is consideration of a smart city strategy document. Mr. Robinson.
Good evening. The purpose of this report is to request Council's consideration of a strategy to guide new expenditures of Measure E Smart City funds. This is a subject that's been discussed with the council on multiple previous occasions, so I'm going to keep my comments brief, but I would like to provide some brief context before the council begins its deliberations. There are a number of definitions of smart city that are out there, but for purposes of this report and for the previous reports that staff has presented, the definition we're using is that a smart city is one that uses information and communications technology and the tools of innovation to enhance its livability, workability, and sustainability. So even before the term smart city was in common use, the city was actively working towards becoming smarter. However, this was typically done in a department-specific way with department-specific initiatives as opposed to a broader citywide strategy. That began to change with the passage of Measure E, which contained language authorizing the use of Measure E funds for projects that would improve internet access and the use of smart technologies. Since demand for Measure E Smart City funds seemed likely to substantially exceed supply, the council directed staff to begin work on a strategy document to help guide the use of these funds. In July, staff presented a report to the council in a workshop format outlining a number of ideas and themes that we thought might become part of a smart city strategy document. The council's feedback from that workshop centered on three key themes. One was scale, and the idea there was that the planning concepts that staff had described in that report appeared to be designed for projects that were larger than the actual budget that we'd be able to apply to those kinds of projects. The second was that the selection criteria and kind of just the basic rules that staff was proposing in that document conceptually seemed too prescriptive, and that the council wanted smart city projects that would provide potentially a multitude of different kinds of benefits and wouldn't necessarily be described by a few predetermined criteria that we had included in the document. And the third was around the concept of nimbleness. And here, within a concept of accountability, the idea was that the city should avoid overburdening the smart city program with excessive rules that might actually slow rather than accelerate smart improvements. The feedback that the council gave at the meeting of July 18th really forced us to go back and look at the whole approach that we were proposing to take. And really, had the council endorsed the ideas that we were presenting in that report, what staff would be presenting tonight would be much more of a typical kind of governmental planning document that might include a set of goals and principles, priority projects, and then maybe a spending plan. But really, after considering the council's comments, it occurs to us that using a traditional government planning document as the basis for smart city work could serve to stifle precisely the kinds of nimble and entrepreneurial activities that the plan is designed to promote. So the work that we've put together tonight is intended to kind of get rid of some of that undesired irony from the previous attempt. That said, if the smart city funds are not differentiated from other Measure E funds, there's a very, very real possibility that they would be sort of resorbed into other kinds of projects, and the city wouldn't see the needle move on its efforts to become smarter. So the Measure E universal policy document that the council's already approved does already provide considerable structure to the process of requesting Measure E funds. So in light of the council's comments from the meeting of July 18th, what we've done is basically layer on just a few rules on trying to maintain as much flexibility as possible that will sort of balance the flexibility with the need to create some guardrails and to allow the appropriate use of Measure E funds. So those three rules are essentially distilled into bullet points in the staff report. One is be inventive. So that would mean, basically any project that would be proposed under the Measure E Smart City Fund should contain some element of inventiveness. So this should not be for things that we already do routinely that do not have some learning aspect to them. So there should be some experimentation, there should be some invention, there should be some learning associated with that. Even if it's not the primary piece, it should be there. Second would be to make an impact. And that could be either a direct impact or just moving the city in the direction of creating a community impact through something that we learned through an experiment that we would conduct using these funds. And then the third is basically track and report results. So, to have staff be accountable for the use of these funds and to make sure that we're using them, in the way that the council wants, and to come back and report on the results that we produce. So we believe that with these rules layered on top of the existing Measure E universal policy, we would have enough structure to differentiate a smart city project from other projects, but at the same time retain the flexibility that the council has indicated that it wants for the use of these funds. So with that said, that's the approach that we're recommending, is that the council approve the plan that we've put together here with the 3 bullets. Before I conclude, I'll say if we've gone too far in leaning this up, there is not a time urgency on this, so we can definitely go back and layer some things back in, but we did want to maybe start from the basis of the leanest possible plan and then go from there. That's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Johansson, we also have a request for public comment, so if you have questions at this
I
point.
can wait. I think, I don't have any questions specific to John, but just comments during our comment period.
All right, then with that, we have a couple of requests to speak. The first is by Laura Jameson.
I don't have any questions.
Okay, and Pat Flint?
First of all, I didn't see a dollar amount that was allocated to this on this agenda item or the July 18th agenda item. And I find some of the statements in this document a little disturbing. You want to take prudent risks with our tax dollars. You want to experiment. I have a problem with using tax dollars for things like that. You want to improve our quality of life, but I didn't see any examples in this document on how you plan to use this money to improve our quality of life. The one that really disturbed me the most is that the city has grown by 75% since incorporation, yet our fire and police have not grown any since then, as far as staff positions go. You want to be less bureaucratic and more entrepreneurial. I don't want a city that's entrepreneurial. I want a city that takes care of our needs first. And I don't see that happening right now. If indeed we want to be entrepreneurial, take it to the citizens and ask them what they'd like to see happen. You want to be inventive. You want to make an impact. What are you going to make an impact on? What projects? What types of projects? And then again, you should be accountable for whatever it is you decide to do. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, so we'll return to the council. Mr. Laurel, maybe again, in our written materials, you can provide us with a little background. I think we all know that the statement about police and fire staffing since incorporation is just patently wrong. So if you can share with us the data.
We can do that.
Great, thanks. Okay, Mr. Robinson, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, thank you.
Okay, council discussion? Mr. Johansson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, John, for this ultralight document. I think I like the brevity of it at this point. I mean, it's still early in the process of determining what this means, and I think we don't really have money yet that we're going to be spending, because I think we need this strategy before we do start spending the money. But I think these 3 points are good. Just looking at the strategy, the first paragraph, I think that's more or less the goals of what we're trying to achieve. I mean, a couple things I'd like to see in that is that not only is it going to be using the tools of innovation to deliver constantly improving services to the community, but also look at improving government efficiencies, and then trying to help improve the well-being of residents. I mean, those are kind of the key factors on what we're trying to do. The goal here is to, and we don't know how yet this is going to work out, but the goal is to actually benefit the citizens.
Absolutely.
One way or the other. So, and then having these separate, of course, there's funding that's attached to it, and right now it's really vague on what the funding is, but there is at least a policy directive that funding will be applied to this. And in terms of what is actually coming out of this, I think this is more kind of a guidance of what the projects are going to be, whether it provides cover for staff to be more inventive and to support that thought within staff, and to have, council supporting the staff in making those reasonable risks or prudent risks. So I think getting to the point of the prudent risks, one of the things, it's not really in this document, it's probably not appropriate, but things I think are going to be guided by use cases. So identification of problems. What is the problem we're trying to solve? Is it something to do with, maybe we're trying to improve, public interaction, more healthy lifestyle changes? Is it to improve, better mobility like we're doing at VIA and some of the other jump and some of the other things that we're doing? So what is the things we're trying to solve? And then how can we, how can we solve that? How can we use technology or some of the innovative techniques and maybe some use the grant funds out of this program to solve that problem? And then the measure of accountability would be, are we solving that problem? So I don't think any of us are really interested in projects just for the sake of it and creating, whatever. It's got to actually have some tangible benefit, either better government efficiencies, better, helps the citizens, either communication with the city or just allows folks to live better in West Sacramento. So as you go down the road and look at projects that are coming in, I'm sure there's going to be some type of vetting project that it's going to be looking at these factors and then rewarding, incentivize folks to bring these factors forward. And then in terms of the performance indicators, that will be, of course, part of whatever the use case is. If there's a problem to be solved, the performance measurements would be, is this solving the problems? But, one element, for example, if you're dealing with the, trying to improve the well-being of residents, I think I let the city manager know about this, but I think the mayor is probably aware too, but the New Cities is looking at nominations for well-being city awards. And that in conjunction with being part of the Smart City Council and keeping plugged into that group, I think is really going to help focus the city on what other cities are doing to increase well-being of the residents, and how they're using technology. So there's a ton of resources out there. I think it's really easy to spend money in Smart City, particularly if you're looking at just bringing out the newest and fanciest technology. If it's not really doing what we wanted to do, then what's the point? I think we're just wasting money. So, I think I think with those comments, I think it's a good start, and it's going to be a process, but I think you're doing good work on this, and thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Mr. Henderson and I have collaborated on this topic quite a bit, and I think I know this is hard, getting it down to this level, but I think it's exactly right. I mean, this is essentially the Bell Labs part of the city, and I know it's so hard. Even for me, every time I'm like, well, no, I wanted to say this. I want you to tell me exactly what's going to happen. With each of these projects, and that's kind of opposite what the point is. That we're trying to take advantage of and harness new ideas that may not have a best practice in 17 other cities already. Startups, whether in our own community or elsewhere, that are making a play at something that has been an intractable problem to solve, or a problem that we didn't even know existed before. And we've seen lots of those. So as I was reading through this, I'm like, well, we're one of the reasons why we are one of the 21 smart cities to watch in the world, according to the publication, is the things that we are already doing. And so I was trying to evaluate, okay, what we're doing, how we're deploying startups and residents, is that consistent with what this strategy says? What we're doing, what we've done in Zen City, what we've done on VIA, and just as some examples, does it fit in this space? And in each of those cases, it's baked in the conflict between the first bullet and the second bullet. That the first bullet is we're trying, we're experimenting, we're iterating, we're learning more about the problem and the shape of solutions and real use cases. The second bullet was it must lead to an improvement, and I'm not sure that's exactly. I know that's not what you mean, but it's not. It's also not correct, right? Because if we knew that. That outreach grid was going to, for sure, improve the connectivity, the service and for homeless individuals, and reduce the incidence and impacts of homelessness. It may not even have been a smart city project at that point. And the same thing with VIA. We're out there testing it. I mean, I feel pretty good about how it's going, and so do the riders. But we went in there not knowing whether or not it would improve it would lead to improvements that would benefit residents. And so that's a dynamic tension, and it's a necessary one. And particularly for you and us, who are used to, very strong accountability measures, you all the time and us every couple of years, this notion that this is our laboratory for being truly innovative, I think is an important one to keep in mind. That doesn't mean that you just run free and do anything, right? And so that I think this leaner language makes it more possible for us to have the flexibility we need to kind of learn as we go. But I do think keeping in mind that dynamic tension is an important part of this. The overall Measury policies really emphasize leveraging, and that's in most of the other domains of the Measury policy, that leveraging is almost always going to be dollars or something equivalent, some monetizable dollar. And I think in this program, in the smart city space, from what we've seen to this point, it's not always the dollar. Sometimes it is we're leveraging the first mover opportunity. Sometimes we're leveraging things, and a couple of the things that we've done is because we signed up with VIA relatively early. We signed up with Zen City relatively early. So it didn't bring any more money in, but we were able to take advantage of an opportunity that was there because we were able and nimble to be able to go right now while they were still looking and desperate for partners to get started. And that's a value to us because it allows us to both get the things cheaper, but also to be very engaged as a city in designing how they turn out. The work that you've been doing, Mr. Robinson, in terms of collaborating with Zen City, at the very, very granular level, has been critical to whether or not that's going to be a useful long-term product for us and for others. And the same thing on VIA. They're learning a lot about how to work with cities from us, but we're also benefiting by having a company that really wants to try their model out. So it's not leveraging. We're not, as I say, it's not. I don't know if it would normally count as our regular definition of leveraging dollars, but it is a leverage of a different kind in the market, and I think this ought to capture that in some way, and I think it's really gotten there. The other piece of it, and I've been mentioning mobility and some of these other things, but it's also like what Parks is doing in the National Fitness Campaign, where there's an opportunity, let's just go. Let's go. We'll figure it out. It's not a nuclear weapon. We're not digging up anything. We're not just demolishing anything. Let's go try it. And within some boundaries, let's learn from it together and let the community decide by voting with their feet, because most things that we treasure are things that we didn't think of before we had them. I wasn't demanding VIA before VIA happened, but now both me and the thousands of people in the community whose lives have been profoundly changed in ways I don't think we really expected, and that they wouldn't have expected. If you had said to them, here's a survey, what would you think of this kind of a service? Some of them might have said okay, but you can't imagine it until it happens. So the notion of iterating and trying really is important, to be less arrogant about us as a city, as to we have all the answers, or we have at least all the menu, and we don't. Others ought to be able to be in that space too. But the other dimension of these criteria, I think, is that we're also trying to create a cluster here of startups and entrepreneurs and technology also. If there's if a bunch of kids in River City High and the Engineering Academy went on to UC Davis School of Engineering, and in their junior year they invent something and they want to start it here. We want to encourage that sort of thing. We want to attract companies here in that space too. And so there is, in addition to the direct service piece, this is also part of, this is connected to our economic development strategy of trying to support and build out our innovation, technology, creative workforce that's important in this sector, but also then is the foundation for the rest of our economic development strategies on some of the larger space. And so I think, connecting to that in the strategy would be helpful. And then I really want to agree with Mr. Johannesson, because I didn't notice it until he mentioned it, but the description of it being, it's to deliver constantly improving services to the community, I think he's right, it's too narrow. That notion, because it isn't, even as the city government, it's not just about the services that we provide. It is exactly about what is the experience of residents in terms of their quality of life, their aspirations, their pain points in the day. But also some of it's not even it's not services that we're delivering to the community sometimes. Sometimes it may just be, we found a way to, cut the internal payroll processing time and, or the open enrollment processing time by half with some solution. That doesn't improve services to the community, but it does make us more efficient internally. And so I think, slightly broadening that notion to include both experiences for residents and businesses that may not be a direct service by us And then secondarily, things that aren't services at all, externally faced, would be helpful as well. So I'm comfortable with absolutely comfortable with the way that you have it now. I'm not suggesting you might necessarily go back and rewrite it. But maybe if the next time as you're iterating this document itself over time, and with some flavor around the direction that you're getting from council tonight, to start to put some more color back into the document over time as we're starting to live in it. So, other comments, Ms. Ending?
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually really appreciate the simplicity and the elegance with this, because I do think it adds, it's harder actually to have a document that's more concise than actually very prescribed. And I do think it adds the space for the creativity that we're hoping for, and folks who voted Measure E were hoping for. I have a very semantic, trying to understand this as we're moving forward. So in the document, it says Measure E Smart City Funds, and then it starts talking about Measure E Smart City Fund without the S. And I just don't know if that changes how we're describing the fund. I'm always thinking of it as funds towards this project rather than a fund sitting separately. So I don't know if that, in the second and third paragraph, if it should be S, or if it doesn't matter. It just stuck, for some reason, it caught me up when I was reading it.
Yeah, there wasn't intended to be a distinction there. So that's a typo. So measure smart city funds that come in into
right,
that
okay.
account.
Okay, perfect. I didn't see a capital F either, so that would have signified something too. Very minor, but caught me up when I was reading it.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and I do appreciate the brevity of a strategy document, and very clearly outlines sort of the guardrails or the rules, right, about what our expectation is as we fund whatever inventive, impactful project you or the staff are proposing. I think the one part I appreciate in this is it was intended to be sort of the grant funding mechanism or area, so that as staff contemplated something or found, sometimes necessity is the mother of all invention, and there's something that somebody needs or does, and they found a better way to do it in staff. Maybe it's payroll or maybe it's something else. There's never that fund you can go to say, hey, if we tried this or used this software or adopted this, where do you go? And that's how I always envisioned this when we had Measure E on the ballot, and how do we articulate this part of it going through the policy section. And I agree that we don't want this to be too constrictive, but it shouldn't stop as the caveat that back to staff and for yourself as you're implementing it, is to have the same level of rigidity around, okay, let's make sure we're articulating what we're doing, so that the investment or whatever it is we are going to agree to, it has to kind of meet that threshold of and be articulated. And short, the strategy short is good, and the brevity of the strategy is good, but as the staff reports come back, there's an expectation. I just want to know what we're trying to do.
Sure.
And not that I expect those to be, this is not a blank check to kind of give us, the ideas need to be thoughtful, thought out, thorough, what the risks are, all the things you would think about that we've gotten pretty good at in the other Measure E expenditures. Staff has done a really good job of articulating a request for that. Is being able to tell us, now is it exactly this? No, but it has to address these issues, and I think that's what I would be looking for.
All right. All right, so staff is asking for approval of the strategy document. All right, it's been moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. All right, council calendar.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. A couple of items that are coming up in October. On Friday, October 12th, Bayer Crop Sciences will have their second annual Community Service Day event. That'll be at Sam Combs Park, and they're going to be redoing the dog park there. The event will start at 10 a.m., and council's all invited to come and help out if they'd like. An email went out earlier today to give you some more information on how you can contact staff if you'd like to volunteer. And then on October 13th, from 11 to 1, Fire Station 45 will have an open house at Fire Station 45. So everyone is in the community is welcome to come and check out the fire station. Thank you.
All right, any questions on the calendar? City manager report?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one item tonight of interest to the council on the state legislative side. I just found out this afternoon that the governor signed SB 1145 by Senator Leyva. This is a bill that now allows EIFDs to fund maintenance costs associated with projects that are financed in whole or in part by the district. So it's significant for us, obviously, one, because we have an EIFD now, but also as we contemplate projects such as take maybe the C Street Bridge, where may ultimately be maintained by a JPA, the EIFD would have a mechanism to provide ongoing maintenance funding, especially for projects that are more difficult to identify ongoing maintenance revenue sources. So it gives us some more flexibility with the EIFD tool going forward. So that's it for tonight.
All right, questions for the city manager? City attorney report. Staff direction from members of the council and future agenda item requests.
I
do have one.
I have one, and I submitted to you in an email, Mr. Mayor, that I'd like to ask staff to put onto agenda request to rename Circle Park, to name it after one of our early entrepreneurs, Mr. Willie DePrado. Been approached working with Patty Palmadesi, a community leader, who has been advocating for this, and we've been doing a research, and I think it's a great thing to do for somebody who was one of our original entrepreneurs here in West Sacramento, serving that community, that neighborhood for a long time. And so I'd like to work with city staff and bring that agenda item back to council to consider.
All right, so I'm joining in that request as well. And Mr. Manager, do you have any, at this stage of the process, we ask the council whether or not basically anyone objects to having that in process, but this is the point, I know you know this, but this is the point where we ask the manager to let us know about any resource implications of the request.
Yes, I believe we can process that request. I believe we have a process that we make a stop at the Parks Commission, but there's an upcoming meeting, I believe, in the first week of October, so we could do that step and bring it back to council. So I know I'll work with Cindy Tuttle, Parks Director, on that process.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
Is there any
I don't see any
objection
issues
to
there.
advancing that agenda item forward? This is not the substance, just the considering the item in the future. Okay. All right, then with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Mr. Johannesson moves and Ms. Andine seconds that the meeting be adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.